So today I'll be talking about the challenge of first-time teaching evolutionary medicine at the medical school. So the principles of evolution are reaching their way into the curriculum of many medical schools worldwide. In Portugal, evolutionary medicine was taught for the first time last spring, and it's currently in its second year. It is offered as an elective course for third-year students of the Nova Medical School. The first challenge that one has to face when teaching evolutionary medicine for the first time to medical students is one has to face the general unfamiliarity of what the discipline goals are and what is the advantage for the medical practice. And this unfamiliarity is seen among the students, which usually have no clue. And because this is an elective course, if they don't know what the course is about, they will not register for it. But unfortunately, it's also seen among the faculty. And the faculty, in general, have never been exposed to the idea that evolution has something to say to medicine or to medical problems, or if they have heard about evolutionary medicine, they think medicine only addresses problems of adaptation. And there is much more to evolutionary medicine than just the study of adaptation. The second challenge is about the course design. We want to identify a strategy that informs the students how evolutionary thinking traverses many areas of medicine, but we want to do that making that knowledge grounded on a scientific framework. The question, what is relevant for a medical doctor to know about evolution, was always in my mind when I designed the course. We want to give the students the tools for an evolutionary thinking, along with the knowledge of the state-of-the-art of the evolutionary medicine research. We want to teach the students how to formulate the why questions. We want to help them develop evolutionary hypotheses and teach them how to predict an evolutionary outcome. But how can we do that? How can we do that if the knowledge in evolutionary biology that they have is what they learn in high school, which usually is who was Lamarck, who was Darwin, what is natural selection, what are homologous characters? So this is how evolutionary medicine is being taught at the Nova Medical School. I divided the course in 3 parts. First, I introduced them to the evolutionary thinking and to give them a brief history of the field of the evolutionary medicine. Then I teach them about the principles of evolutionary theory. This is what I call a crash course in the principles of evolution. And finally, this is what they are all looking for, which are the applications to medicine. So the first 2 parts usually do not take more than 4 sessions, and I will now explain a little bit about each one. So I start by telling the students that medicine is based on biology, but it's evolution that generates the matrix that contextualize all the biological facts in the evolutionary history of life. And when I show the students this figure, I get from them the first eye-opening moment. It's when they start thinking, really. I tell them the process of mutation, natural selection, drift, recombination, these are all important evolutionary processes to all these other species. Why man should be an exception? This is an interesting moment because it's also an opportunity to engage the students into the discussion of what is the consequences that medicine and technology in general has in our evolutionary path. I also explain the difference between ultimate and proximate questions, the typological population, and phylogenetic thinking. With the principles of evolutionary theory, we reach the third challenge. Medical students are very goal-oriented. And my experience is teaching evolutionary theory to a medical student is not the same as teaching to a medical student. Medical students allow us to go to a certain level of abstraction until they interrupt us with the yes, but type of questions. One example. I understand what beneficial and deleterious mutations are, how those are related with the selective coefficient. But how and when will that be useful for me to estimate that for a particular mutation that causes a disease? So in fact, there is a trade-off here. There is a trade-off between engaging them in questions that are relevant for the medical practice, but at the same time, provide them the basics of the evolutionary theory. We need to provide the basics of the evolutionary theory. With applications to the medicine, we reached challenge 4. And challenge 4 for me was, I'm an evolutionary biologist, I'm not a medical doctor. And the way I structured the course, every week we talk in a completely different subject. So we start by talking about adaptation in human populations. I think I forgot to say about these topics. Ideally, in this crash course in evolutionary theory, I would like to discuss with the students the process of mutation, natural selection, drift. I think it's important to discuss evolution of sex, where is recombination, limits to natural selection, how do we study adaptation, the adaptationist program, giving them basic knowledge of recent human evolution and current patterns of genetic diversity of human populations. And now here, the fourth challenge. So we talk about adaptation in human populations, incompatibilities with modern environment, evolution of the defense mechanisms, and this is what in general people have in mind when they think about evolutionary medicine. But we also talk about phylogenetic application to medical problems, evolution in cancer, the evolution of antibiotic resistance, evolution in immune and reproductive systems, evolutionary theories of aging and longevity, applications of evolutionary medicine to psychiatry. In fact, it's a challenge to master all these topics and to provide medical examples to all of them. So one of the solutions I follow is to invite researchers to come to the class and present their work, researchers that work in these specific topics, and come to the class and discuss with the students the research they are doing and why that might be important for the medical doctor. Another thing that I did, and I did that for particularly this class, which are applications to psychiatry, I invited a medical doctor, a psychiatrist that has a long experience in the clinic to discuss with the students some of the topics. I gave papers for the students to read, and I told them, you're going to defend the view of evolutionary medicine, and let's have a debate with a practitioner about these topics. And this was one of the classes they most liked. They really engage in these discussions, and they really enjoy them. So at the end, the goal is, we want at the end of the semester for the students to associate evolution and natural selection with antibiotic resistance, cancer, microbiota, eating disorders, autoimmune disease, hospital management, aging, hygiene hypothesis, depression, clinic narrative, etc. I cannot talk about how my strategy in each of these classes, but I will try to talk about these three. There are many applications of phylogenetic applications to the medical problems. From the identification to taxonomy on everything microbiome, there are many examples. From bioprospecting and pharmaceutical industry, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples in tracing the transmission of microorganisms responsible for infection diseases. We also discuss inferring within patient evolution by discussing this really interesting paper on genetic variation of a bacterial pathogen within patients with cystic fibrosis. We talk about reconstruction of ancestral states by discussing this article on the evolutionary history of the gene functional decline and investigation of the possibilities of using an ancestral protein for therapeutic applications. And of course, cancer. Phylogenetics applied to cancer, identification of the origin of metastasis, reconstruction of the mutational process, target therapeutics, etc. And why is this possible? This is possible because there are two complementary evolutionary processes that happen on us, and they'll help us understand why we are as an organism and why we are susceptible to certain diseases. There is an evolutionary process that happens at the germline. Every generation is an opportunity for new diversity to be produced and for selection to act on that diversity. And on every individual, we have a somatic evolution. Every individual is independent realization of that somatic evolution. And this has been excellently and very successfully applied to the study of cancer, where we can study somatic genetic lesions, cancer progression, clonal selection, etc., by looking at the somatic evolution that happens within one individual, but also at evolution of tumor suppressive mechanisms by evolution that happens at the germline. What I would like to propose here is that this framework of looking at evolution, both of at the germline and at the somatic level, can be applied to other problems. For instance, in topics related with the reproductive system, we can talk about genomic conflict and imprinting, the evolution of menopause, maternal age effects, etc., by thinking about processes that act on the germline. But during gametogenesis and fertilization, actually there is a huge selective pressure that happens in our bodies. For instance, in the male reproductive system, a man can produce between 20 to 40 million sperms per ml, but only one is going to fertilize the egg. This is a huge selective pressure that happens on the sperm. In the female, we know by the hormone-dependent process of apoptosis, there is this process called follicular atresia that has been associated as a process that will provide a selection of the healthiest follicles selection for optimal quality for fertilization. So this is just a way that we can use to help the students understanding how natural selection applies to our body and help us understand how disease happens. This also, it helps us to transfer knowledge that we learn from some fields to the other fields. You know, an excellent example is all the experience that clinicians have gained from the aggressive adaptive therapeutics that have been applied to cancer. It's important also in the evolution of resistance in chemotherapies. All of this information may be useful also to understand or to help us design new protocols, therapeutic protocols for the bacterial infections. So basically, this evolutionary context that evolution provides to medicine allow us to transfer this knowledge across topics. So this is something of what the students have to say. Some of the students said, evolutionary medicine makes us question textbook knowledge, that everyone takes it for granted. And this was about when we were talking about using, questioning the protocols that are used to treat antibiotic, to treat bacterial infections, and we were questioning if less aggressive and more moderate treatments could have an advantage when the infection is done with bacteria that already have resistance. What is the most important useful message that you retain from this course? Some of the students say, well, one study, the existence of compensatory mutations. The way I read is specific knowledge. It's knowledge that they will not get probably for a microbiology class, but because this class is focused on the evolutionary process, and that's what he mentioned, nothing in medicine is static. An evolutionary perspective can allow us to think of different solutions to some of the problems. In this particular case, only 10% of the students have chosen evolutionary medicine as their first option, but at the end of the course, 100% will recommend to their colleagues. So I want to acknowledge the help for Dr. João Ferreira, which with me was responsible for this course, Dr. Stephen Stearns, who provided me with the material before it was available, and funding to come to this talk. Great, thank you.